And thank you for joining us on day one of TIA's Network of the Future conference, again right here in Dallas, Texas. Joining us in the Dell TI Now studio is Paul Obsitnik. He's the Vice President of Service Provider Marketing at Juniper Networks. And Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Abe.
Hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you got it perfectly right.
Great. Well, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
First question is this. Service providers, they want to shorten their time to market. They want to shorten their sales cycle. They want to shorten the service cycle. How do they do that by leveraging new technologies like software-defined networking and NFV?
So, very good question. I think, let me take a step back. When we look at service providers, the good news is their core product, the network, is in ever-increasing demand. You're seeing the explosion of data, fixed as well as mobile. So the core network is in increasing demand, but the question is, how can they further monetize that? And our view is that to really drive that monetization, it really is going to lead to customization. You need to be looking at how can I customize my services, move from dozens of markets for millions to millions of markets for dozens. And a lot of that is going to be driven through virtualization. So virtualization is that linchpin to be able to drive that customization to further improve the economics for the service providers. And so that virtualization is in no small part being driven by some of the trends of software-defined network, SDN, network function virtualization, NFV. So it really is those technologies and taking those technologies and applying them to the existing network and evolving that network so that they can leverage the benefits of SDN and NFV in terms of automation, in terms of operational expense, in terms of scale, all being driven towards fundamentally creating those new services to open up new revenue streams for the service providers and really take those operational and financial metrics that might have been a 5% operating income return and drive that to a 10%, a 15%, 20%, and get it closer to some of the financial metrics we're seeing from some of the Web 2.0 companies, for example, a Facebook or a Google that might have a 25% operating income. So we see it as a great opportunity to take the existing network, the new technologies, and leverage that to drive then improved financial performance.
Paul, you just touched on a few of the positive implications of SDN and NFV, but what are some of the challenges for that technology?
Well, I think the challenge is it's new. When we look at SDN and NFV, it is a new paradigm. At Juniper, we're looking at it not just as a new product, but as a fundamental shift. Many people look at it as a business transformation of the service provider network. And so I think the challenges are you need to be looking at this holistically. It's not just how do I deploy software in my network or how do I make a change to hardware. It fundamentally is looking at the complete package of software and hardware, but also operational procedures, the process, and it's hardware and software are changing, but even more important is the humanware. How do we change our organization? How do we change our processes and procedures to be able to take advantage of some of these capabilities? And that's can be a very difficult challenge, and it's something that needs to be thought through from beginning to end and be part of a broader strategy to develop to handle that impact.
Paul, you talk about this transformation from hardware to software as far as the approach and business model for your company and other companies in the industry. Is there a parallel that you can draw to another transformation cycle prior, or is this unprecedented?
No, I think there's actually a very good question and an interesting parallel to VMware, who really started the trend towards virtualization on the compute side. And so when VMware first introduced their product, the focus was, okay, I had 3 servers. I have a web server, say, a VPN server, and maybe a firewall. And I have each of those applications running on a very expensive server. And so VMware came out and said, you know what, you don't need 3 servers. Just buy 1 server. Your utilization is low on all 3, and use my technology and put each application on that 1 server. Great. I only have to buy 1 server instead of 3. But then very quickly, companies started to realize that, oh, interesting, when I do this now, this is allowing me to also drive some operational efficiencies. So from an operating standpoint, my operating expense is lower, it's easier for me to manage that 1 device. And then following on from that, boom, all of a sudden new models, new business opportunities like the cloud started coming up. And so this interesting parallel from kind of looking at capital savings to operational savings to finally new revenue streams, we're seeing at Juniper with working with some of our customers on virtualization in the network, where initially a lot of it was around, okay, well, this is going to help me save on my capital expense, and it will. There are going to be benefits there, but I think what our service provider customers are starting to see is, oh, the greater savings is going to be on the operational expense, the automation and efficiency that we can drive in terms of our operational performance. But even more so, some of the leading edge companies are starting to see, oh, wait a minute, this is going to actually open new revenue streams for me. Now I can use NFV, SDN, and start to be able to offer some new services to my service providers, and doing it not giving them a button on the website that says, click to call, where I click and then it gives me the phone number I call, but I click the button and it all reconfigures now in the background to where the service gets delivered from months. Now it's minutes, if not seconds. And so I think it's that same type of evolution I believe we're seeing on the networking side that we saw on the compute side with VMware. And that's where at Juniper, we're really focusing on three principles. Simple to say, I think a little more difficult to do, is automate, scale, and create. And so automating your operations so you can drive greater operational efficiency and flexibility in your operational structure. Scaling, as we're seeing the demand, how do you cost effectively scale the infrastructure? And that means leveraging new systems, new technologies, intelligent silicon, so advanced silicon where you need the performance, but then also merchant or x86 where from an economic standpoint that's a better return. But doing it within a wrapper of SDN virtualization to where now instead of having a part of my network that maybe I ran at 40% utilization, now because I can more dynamically configure the network, I can run it at 80, 85% utilization, so I can make better use of the assets I bought. So automate, scale, but ultimately leading towards creating these new services. So leveraging an SDN environment, a virtualized environment, to where I can more agilely scale up my services and scale them down if they don't work. If I take a risk on a certain service, it doesn't pan out, I can scale it down with minimal cost impact to my organization. But giving them that flexibility to dynamically create these services in a more personalized environment and scale them up to drive these new revenue streams.
I was just about to ask you, Paul, about the long-term plan for SDN with your partners, carriers, or some of your customers.
Right.
And I think you really answered that question, is that if it doesn't work out with a long-term plan, you can always scale it back. And just by nature of SDN, it allows you to do so.
Yeah, well, I think that applies to individual services. And it's the whole scale up, scale out to where we give, I think with virtualization and where Juniper's focus is, we're focusing on giving our customers the ability to take the different services, the different functions, and deploy them in the network where they need it. If it makes more sense for their strategy to have it centralized in the data center, we can support that. If it makes more sense for them to put it out at the edge, we can support that. Because different customers, some customers are looking at more of a centralized approach where they're saying, hey, I just want to have 3 or 4 major data centers and that's where my applications and my services will reside. Others are saying, no, I want to push them out. I want to have 2,000 mini data centers out towards the edge. So we think that both strategies are valid based upon the objectives you're trying to accomplish. And so we're allowing our customers to deploy that. And so from a service application, you can scale it out to the edge if needed, scale it up, or scale it down as needed. But we do believe from an overall virtualization strategy, as I talked about earlier, this truly is a seminal event for the industry, and it's changing the business model, we believe, for service providers. And so from, to your question, this is something that isn't a short-term approach. You've got to take a long-term approach. You've got to look at a multi-year strategy and look at how am I going to take my existing Joule, my current network that is driving significant value, but how do I evolve that to a more profitable state? And that is with a longer term approach, looking at hardware, software, peopleware, and looking at some of your key vendors as strategic partners to work with and evolve the network there. And so at Juniper, that's how we're approaching it with our key partners. We're very much focused on delivering a lot of value. We're proud of the fact that AT&T has selected us as a Domain 2.0 vendor, which I think shows a good positive input on where we're going and on our virtualization strategy. We've got to keep moving. We still have a lot of work to do, but we think we're in a great position, and we're hearing very positive feedback from our customers about how we're helping them evolve their network to this future state.
Well, TI Now would second that. Anytime we need some more information about innovations in the network, we call the guys at Juniper and they send somebody over who's knowledgeable. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Abe. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Paul. And thank you for joining our coverage of TIA's Network of the Future conference. The Dell TI Now studio will be streaming live throughout the conference. You can view our live stream and all of our programming at tinow.org. So long.